Hello, I'm Harrington Vodka. We're back. Let's go straight back and not lose any minutes. Carl, how do we protect ourselves in a situation like the Philippines, wherein the barriers of entry, the non-ASEAN countries are now going to come in? We're already enjoying zero tariffs, sometimes up to 5% as of now.
Yes.
But because the constitution's there, it doesn't really allow them to come in and compete on even ground. Where does that get you? Being a foreigner, but you've been here like 10, 20 years.
15 years.
15 years, you know the country, you're very localized, you speak the language, and you've seen how it turns out. How do we protect the brands that are here?
First of all, you have to understand branding. A lot of the issues that we have in the Philippines is they get confused between marketing and branding. You have to understand what your brand is. You have to understand the integrity of the brand, that you continue to supply the same service year in, year out, so people expect what they're going to get all the time. We have not been very good at that in this country. Superbrands has tried very, very hard, and it has been successful in certain brands to keep that integrity going. And people understand that with brand academies. We've tried very hard to do that. So that's very, very important. That you cannot go elsewhere outside until you know where you stand inside. Sometimes they don't really know where they stand inside because they've had no competition. If you understand where you are inside, then you look at your markets overseas. How do I compete in that market? Who are my competitors? A lot of homework has to be done to see how do I enter that market? How do I get in? How do I compete against Tiger Beer, if you're San Miguel or whoever? How do I do that? What are their strengths? What are my strengths? Don't even bother going there until you've done that homework and the exercise. That's my opinion.
Jason, do you think the local brands are going to stand up to the foreign brands around the ASEAN, much less the global brands in Europe and America, if they come in?
Well, honestly, I do think the Philippine brands will hold the test of time, because for the benefit of the Filipinos.
Well, what an optimist, mate.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I am a bit of an optimist, frankly.
Go ahead.
But those brands which have only relied on being the monopoly in this country for so long and created dynasties where they've never had any real competition, they've never really done any sort of marketing or branding of their own, they've literally done nothing but supply a product to fulfill demand, they're the ones that are going to suffer. They're the ones that need to integrate a strategy immediately to be able to tackle.
So gone are the days wherein just because my price is low and I fulfill a demand and you need this product, you need a bag because you need to put your books in a bag to go somewhere. So basically that kind of marketing is gone.
That doesn't exist anymore. I mean, someone from Hong Kong who's supplying baby boy blue clothing, and someone in the Philippines has been supplying baby boy blue clothing for XYZ years. Someone in Hong Kong comes in and offers the exact same price as someone in the Philippines. The Filipino is going to go for the brand which is better, more reliable, has a long-standing, reliable history. They're no longer just going to go for the cheaper option. So that's what you have to differentiate yourself on.
How long do you reckon a brand takes to make that brand, to generate that awareness, for that brand to have that integrity sunk into the consumer? How long do you reckon? 3 years, 5 years is enough?
Well, it really depends on the product. There's no real timeline you can
That's what I figured too. Yeah. There's no real one size fits all.
No.
Yeah, because there's different sensitivities.
Yeah, exactly.
On the banking system, I keep going back to that because everything in growth is always banking. You know, I always find it funny, Rommel, that here in the Philippines, brokers and real estate brokers or realtors are the ones who dictate rates on real property. And yet, the very same rate, the Filipino who is willing to get only on his savings 1/3 of 1% is willing to pay 6% to the same bank on interest rates. And yet, he doesn't realize when he rents properties or when he buys properties, the market, based on the brokers' hearsay, dictate that the prices are so much more than the value of the vacancy of what you call the mortality rate of rentals or even purchase. You purchase a property for 10 million, you can't seem to sell it for that price. Why? Because if you had to break it down on a per month basis and assume you're going to rent it out, you can't even get that rent money. So how is it the banks are falling, they're falling prey to the brokers who dictate real prices, which is ridiculous. Right. Has that happened in America? Does that happen? Because I know you work with a Canadian group and in America, and well,
the dangers here with the banking system is there is no technical database that pretty much shows exactly what your property is worth versus what's nearby or what's been reported by a real estate agent, right?
That's true, isn't it? Isn't that peculiar? Is it the same? Yeah. Only in the Philippines.
Only in the so if you went to
really,
America,
only in the Philippines. We have to break that barrier. But
you
go
have
ahead.
to break that barrier. So there's many databases in America, whether it's Zillow.com or whether it's the real estate license group. They have databases that show the sales for the last 10 years and how everything went up and how everything's going down. But here, it's just really what did the guy next door sell his for? Which is actually a problem because 3 houses down 3 years ago, it might have been up for sale for 12 months, but you would never known it, right?
Yes.
That's a problem. What's going to happen with the Asian integration is you're going to have people come in and basically it will be the present. The future state of where everybody else is where the Philippines will have to be. And because banks across the oceans are going to demand that kind of simple technology, you're going to see a vast ramp up of what's going to happen in the banking industry here.
So, in other words, unless the Filipino is ready in the next 6 months, the storm, the tsunami that's about to come in, called the ASEAN integration, is going to knock him off through his feet. It's what all three of you are saying.
They'll be exposed.
Exactly.
Am I right?
Exposed.
Yes.
The man who can't swim or hasn't swum and hasn't gone anywhere is already dead before it even begins.
Well, first of all, you've got to save what you've got and make sure you keep it. And secondly, you have to look at how to expand into those other markets. San Miguel has done that quite successfully in other countries already. To be fair to San Miguel, they're strong in Vietnam and countries like that. With various
To be fair to
different
San Miguel, yes.
Unilever-
My problem with San Miguel is they're proposing now airports. They're into the NLEX, doing roads. They're doing food. You know, my only question was that proposal for that $10 billion airport is if it only can produce good San Miguelite. I mean, you know.
Well, the other thing is that don't forget they're moving out. San Miguel is moving out a lot of consumer products. They're moving out to try to sell the companies that they have. They're moving heavily in
Power, utility.
Power, yeah. But my view is with the ASEAN integration, why don't the Malaysian power companies come here? Why don't the Thai power companies come here and participate in these projects and airport projects and things like that? Should not just be local investment. Should also be foreign investment. So we don't have to waste all our money on our own infrastructure. We can bring other people in who can help our infrastructure. That then gives us more time to focus on product exports, service exports, which we haven't really spent much time on.
You know, our Constitution is very limiting, as you all very well know. Foreigners are only allowed to own in business up to 40% in corporations, and you need a Filipino to be there. In other countries, you don't see this. In Australia, for example, I think you can come in with your capital, being a foreign investor, come in, you can buy property. Am I right, Jason?
Yes, you can.
Okay, and operate and register with the Bureau of Trade and have the Security and Exchange Commission and all of that. And you will not need a local representative. Here we have such a protectionist trade. We have such a protectionist type of constitution that it allows the oligarchs to stay their powers, so it seems. In fact, they've gone 10 steps ahead, like the president's family. It's called the aristocracy. Self-named, self-proclaimed, some type of superiority. But that cannot work in a competitive field called an integration, especially the 10-country integration, can it?
No, it's going to go away immediately. I mean, look at Hong Kong as a prime example.
Good example.
Now you can just go straight in, you can own a business, and you can close that same business in the
same
same day.
Correct.
So if the Philippines was more like that, you'd see a great, great increase in the standard of living, the standard of business, the standard of just generally everything in this country. But then again, it's up to the consumer to sort of push that and the people to follow.
Nah, in the Philippines, we have no powers. The only ones that have the power are those who are in the Napolist, who actually make millions, but I am being sarcastic. Rommel, you're exposed to the Philippines. Being you were born here, but you were raised in America. You're exposed to America basically in the system that it operates. Do you see the Filipino turning around, educating himself, and tweaking and rebranding himself into what the world and globalization will require?
I think so. I think the Filipino, the middle class, is coming up and becoming a force to reckon with. What their expectations of how they live, where they live. They won't allow brownouts anymore. They're going to get mad. They're not going to allow the inability to use the internet access for true information. All these things, they're changing because the middle class is now being more demandative. The key is, can they move the government so that, for instance, just a basic thing, $100,000 is guaranteed in North America. If the bank should go under, your $100,000 is safe. In the Philippines, not so much. It's about $10,000.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. It's $10,000, 500,000 pesos.
It's stuff like that that cannot be accepted anymore. They cannot accept that. If we're going to make a lot of money, if we're going to be the middle class, you can't tell me I'm going to put money in your bank and you're going to lose it for me without any protection on my own.
What they have done, though, is they've increased the capitalization of banks and insurance companies.
They require depossits.
Yes,
10%
but also,
of the 10%, which is very high.
And also with banks, there's different standards like Basel III coming up. And if you haven't got the money to get the Basel III standard, you're out. You can't trade anymore. You can't bank anymore.
And the Philippines has to abide by this.
And they have to abide by these laws. So I think those things will make the banks stronger. And after they're stronger, you can give them longer guarantees.
But the banks in the Philippines, gee, we have what, as of last count, what, 75, 78 banks? Canada only has 5. Can you imagine? Is there so much money we require 75, 78 banks in this country?
We've got more than 78.
We have more than that.
Yes. We've got rural banks, thrift banks, you've got all that stuff. The rural banks will die unless they merge, or they can have the services that the uni banks have. The uni banks are really getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and a lot of them I think will sell. I think, for example, when Malaysia and Singapore come in, I know for a fact, firsthand, they want to buy some Philippine banks. They really want to become big shareholders in some of the larger banks. I can't tell you which ones, but one of the biggest banks, for example. And there are some other banks that are sort of mid-sized banks, like Union Bank, for example. Right? They're a classic example. I mean, they're basically the Boytis' bank. It's a nice bank, nice little cozy bank, but they're never going to go anywhere fast. They just won't. They help the Boytis fund some of the business. They fund other business, but they're real amidst.
So it's the Boytis private bank. That's what they should have called
correct.
it. Take out the union.
Yeah, but look at Bank of Commerce, the same thing.
Yes,
you can see all these banks have been like that before. The big banks
Which should not be allowed by the Securities and Exchange.
In most other countries, banks are owned by shareholders, not by families.
The public.
Not by owned by the public, not by families. Here, it's different.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to open up the new Tambuatco Bank, and we're going to offer you services and branding. I'm being sarcastic, but don't think it's so funny because it is real in this country. We'll be right back. Stay with us.